What's going on, guys? It's Cooper Codes, and in this video we are going to be making the Supabase V2 database management system. Although I'm going to be using React for this front end, the kind of ideas and concepts are applicable to pretty much any framework or library that uses Supabase. This video is a perfect introduction to Supabase V2. I'm going to be showing off all the different types of database operations. For example, we can create a product. So I put in a product name and a product description here. We can create this product here. And now we'll see within our current database items, we have the Cooper Codes course, which I just made. We also have the ability to delete products. For example, I don't want this picture frame anymore. I can press delete product here, and you're going to see the product is going to go away. All these operations are showing us in real time the actual value of a database table in Supabase. We can also edit the values of certain things in our Supabase database table. For example, let's say I want to add more of a description to this Cooper Codes course. I can press edit product. We can go into the product description and add something such as I teach Supabase database V2 in this course. I can then update the product by pressing update. And as you guys see, it's actually updating our item in Supabase and showing to our front end here. So if we go over to the Supabase database, we will see that the value of that Cooper Codes course includes that little Supabase edition I added to the end of it. Let's get started with creating our React application. I'm going to open up VS Code to an empty folder, and we can get started by creating our React application by saying npx create-react-app, and I'm going to name the folder for application client. Now that that's built, we can go into there by saying cd client. Now that we're within the React application, I'm going to install all the different dependencies we're going to need for this project. I'm going to get started by npm installing react-bootstrap, and then also just bootstrap. This is some code that's going to help us create some basic bootstrap components to show our Supabase information. And for the Supabase functionality, I'm going to get that from the package @supabase/supabase-js. So your package.json should look something like this. We can get started by going into our source folder and opening up app.js. I'm going to comment out the step-by-step process we're going to make when creating this project. Firstly, we are going to create the user interface. So this is the navbar, the form to create products, and also the product card, so kind of showing all the different data from our database. We're then going to set up Supabase, so like create our account and also create a table for our products over at Supabase. Then we can finally implement the create, read, and update, delete logic for the products. So this is stuff like creating a product, deleting a product, and making sure that connects up with Supabase. All right, so within the app.js, we are going to get started with creating the user interface. I'm going to delete the entire return statement of our application because we're not going to need any of this boilerplate code. I'm just going to make this return an empty React fragment for now to get rid of the error. And so firstly, I'm going to create a very simple navbar component just so we have something at the top of our site. I'm going to import a bunch of different things from react-bootstrap. This includes the navbar, the container, and also a nav component to help us with some more navbar stuff. So we can go within our application, and so at the top of our application, we are going to initialize this navbar just like this. Then we're going to create a container so everything within our navbar is kind of contained, isn't spanning across the entire screen, for example. To create that title to the left of our navbar, we can use something called a navbar.brand. This is kind of just a generic website, so I'm going to call the title of this store products. And then we are going to have the nav component, which allows us to store things like items in our navbar. This is going to be pulled to the right by default, and it's just going to have one nav.item. Just to kind of fill out the site, I'm going to say created by Cooper Codes. If you want to use this for your resume or for a portfolio or anything like that, you can say created by your name here. Before we run this code, we're going to want to make sure to go to the top of our application and import the Bootstrap CSS so all of our Bootstrap components pretty much work. We can import this manually through the folders by saying bootstrap/dist/css/bootstrap.min.css. Now we can npm start our application to see what it looks like so far. All right, it looks pretty good. Now we're gonna get working on the form that allows the users to input a certain product, for example. Under our navbar, we can wrap everything we're going to write after this in one large container, just so it's kind of held within the middle of our web page. To create this form, we're going to import a couple more things from Bootstrap. We're going to need the form, we're going to use rows and columns, and we're also going to use a button. We can initialize one row here to hold all of our form logic. I'm going to make a header at the top of our site explaining what this kind of part of the site is for. It's going to tell them that this allows you to create a product for the Supabase database. We're then going to create some inputs, which is why we imported the form component. And so to label the inputs, we can use form.label. For example, I'm going to say product name, and then the input that is labeling, which is going to be under form.control. Form.control is going to take a couple of properties. We want this form control to be a text control, so we can say type is equal to text. We can also set an ID of this equal to name, and that's all we're going to do for now. As you guys see, our site currently looks like this. In order to stop this from wrapping across the entire screen, I'm going to put everything we've written so far inside of a column. So we can establish a column on the outside of everything we've written so far, like this. And we want to say on a very small screen, we want the column to take up all of the 12 different Bootstrap columns. But on a medium screen, we don't want it to span as long. I'm going to say something like take up 8 columns instead. So if we look at the difference, we can now go to our site and you'll see it's not spanning the entire 12 columns now, it's only spanning 8. Now we can create another input that's going to allow us to show the product description. We can just copy over what we had for the product name and just change it to product description, change its ID equal to description. I'm then going to use a break element here, which just allows us to put some space in between these two things without having to deal with padding. It's just easier. And I'm also going to put a button at the bottom here. So I'm going to say button, and it's going to say create product in Supabase DB. All right, let's go see what it looks like. Amazing. So now we have a spot for the user to input a name, input a description, and then create the products. In order to give our React application access to the name and description, we can create states which allow us to capture the values of whatever the user has entered. So we can scroll up to the top of our React application and import useState from React. We can start by creating a state for the name of our product. So we can say const name, and then the function to set our state, which is setName, is equal to a useState of an empty string, because initially the value is going to be empty. We can copy this line here because we're going to create another empty string here to hold the description. And then we want to set description. But right now, nothing's happening. These states are always going to be empty forever. To hook up these states to the actual input components, one thing we can do is use the set name or the set description whenever the text changes. So on this form control here, we can call the onChange event and set it equal to some functionality we want to run whenever the text changes. We can take the event coming from that change, and then after that event happens, we want to set the name equal to the event.target.value, which means the value of this current form control. We're going to do the exact same logic for the onChange of the product description, except instead of setting the name state, we want to set the description state. In order to see the actual values of our states, we can go up to the top here, and after the states are declared, we can just console.log name and also console.log description, just to see them changing. Let's go over to a React application. So as you guys can see, when I type in product name here, the value of our state is changing to whatever I've typed in. The same thing goes for the description. I say this is the description, and now it's being shown to our React application. This is great news because once we get into Supabase, we have something to input when we want to create a product. Now let's make the UI component to show the current database items under this input. I'm going to go to the bottom of this row here and then indent in. I'm going to use an HR, which allows us to have kind of like a line through the website. You've probably seen it before. Then after that little break, I'm going to create a header to show what this part of the website is. It's going to be showing our current database items. I'm going to create some rows and columns to hold our database items. So we can make a row like this. We can then use some properties on the row. For example, on an extra small screen, we want to show just one column in a row. But if we go to a larger screen, for example, we want to show 3 different ones. And then to put some gaps in between the different columns so they're not directly next to each other, we can do a class name is equal to G-4, which means a gap size of 4. In order to show the different products in our database, I'm going to create a separate component called product card. We can go into the source folder and make a new file called product.card.js. We can call it function product card. Then at the bottom, we can export default product card. This card is going to be using a couple of different things from React Bootstrap. So at the top of this file, we can import card, button, and form from React-Bootstrap. We're going to have some more logic here eventually, but I'm just going to directly return the component. It's going to use that card like we have above, and I'm going to set its style equal to a width of 18 rem. Within the card, we can define different things like the card.body, for example. I'm going to use the card.title to show the actual name of the product. So I'm going to say product name for now, but this is going to change to a variable, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm also going to use the card.text to show the product description. Then we can create some buttons here as well. For example, a button to delete the product, then another button to edit the product. I want the delete product to show up as red, so we can use the button variant like this and show off the danger color. And in the other button, I can use a different color by saying a different variant, for example, secondary. And so let's go and import this product card into our app.js by going to the top of app.js and importing product card from /product card. We can now go to the row on the bottom here, put it in like this, and it takes in no properties, so that'll work just like that. We do want to make sure that it's contained within a column though, so we can do column, then wrap it around like this. Let's go see what this looks like. Looks pretty good. It's about what we would expect. So we can now see that the product card is showing on our website. We can also take a look at what our website might look like with a bunch of different product cards by going back to our app.js and just copying this column with the product card over and over. One last important piece of functionality that is not trivial is creating this edit product button. When we press on edit product, we want the entire card to change. Instead of showing the product name and description, we want to show some input boxes for the user to edit new values to their product. We can do this by creating a state within our actual product card. The state is going to say, if we are not editing, show the information that we see right now with just like the delete product and edit product. But if we are editing the card, show different information, show the editing version of the card. So let's get into creating that. We can use the React use state to hold if a card's being edited or not. So we can start by importing use state from React. Then at the top, we can set a state for if editing is happening or not. For example, const editing and then set editing is equal to use state of initially false. And that initial false is important because initially the user is not going to be editing a card. We want them to kind of opt into editing. And think about it like this. Where is the user going to want to start editing the card? Although that might seem simple, we want to call the set editing when they press the edit product button here. So we can change the onClick event of this button equal to calling set editing with true. And so we can use this editing variable to determine what shows up within the card.body. So we can use a curly brace here to define a ternary statement with the editing variable. Gonna wrap this all the way around here, this curly brace. And so if editing is equal to true, we can say then display all this code under it. We can say else by using the colon. If that's not true, show a component under it. And we can wrap all this code within a React fragment so it stops giving us a red error. Oh, and this should be editing is equal to false. Because think about it, if the user just loaded in, you would want to show the product name and the product description, right? And so if they press on edit product here, editing is going to become true. So instead of going into this part of the component, it's going to go into here. And so we can make a little H4 showing the user they are now editing the product. Just to show this functionality, we can go back to a React application and we can press edit product. It's going to change the state, but you'll see there's no way to get back, but we can go to all of our different cards and just start editing the product, which is pretty cool. Now we can add on top of just saying editing product and put some real functionality inside of the card. Most importantly, we might want to create a button that allows the user to go back. So we can say button size is equal to small and just say something simple like that, go back. And we can now define the onClick to say, we can now go back to when they weren't editing. So we can say set editing is now equal to false. I'm going to put a BR here just to put some space between the button and the form components. And now guys, this is going to be crazy, but check this out. We don't have to rewrite all this code. Let's go back to our app.js and let's go to these forms that we have labeled here. Start at the button and bring all these different forms like this. Go from this form here to the form product name and the button in the bottom. We can copy this and bring it over to our product card just to save us some time. And you'll see, because we're in a separate component, we can even use the same states if we wanted to. So we can go back to app.js and copy the name and the description state from above and bring it over to our product card. This allows us to use the user inputted values within this product card. If someone's editing a certain card and they're typing within a certain card, you would expect that those values within that card are the ones that are going to be sent to the server, right? And so these states are going to help us with that. So let's go see what this looks like. So now we can edit products, go back, for example, and when we edit the products and we use this name and description, we're also going to be able to use these inputs for when we eventually get to the Supabase logic. So this is everything we're going to need for setting up the user interface. Let's get into Supabase. We can get started by going to supabase.com. We can then sign into Supabase. Once you're fully signed in, you should be brought to this app.supabase dashboard. Press the green new project button here. You You can then put in your name. For example, I'm just going to say Supabase DB video, then also the database password. I usually just generate a password. I can copy this password to save it here and bring it over to my React application, but I don't believe this is going to quite matter for our video, but just in case you have it for the future, just going to save that here. Choose the region closest to you, then create new project. While your Supabase is getting set up, we can go into the source folder here and create a new folder called Supabase client.js. We are going to import the create client from @Supabase like this. And then we're going to say the const Supabase URL is equal to a string we're soon going to get, and then the const Supabase anon key, so your anonymous key is also going to be equal to a string we're going to get soon. Then we can export a constant Supabase, which is something we are going to create by using the create client here. And create client requires two things to pretty much make your client: the URL of your client, so Supabase URL, and also the Supabase anon key. So once everything's set up, you should be sent to a page like this. You're going to want to scroll down to where your project URL and your API key are. We can copy this project URL here, paste it into our application, and we can copy the API key here and bring it over to our application and just paste it in. I'll just make a comment that to be more secure, you're going to want to store these in a .env file. I didn't do that in this video just to save time, but in my more full stack Supabase videos, I'll always use a .env file for the added security. And so before we get coding away with Supabase, we need to actually create a database table inside of our Supabase SQL editor. To actually edit the SQL of our Supabase database, we can go over to the left and press SQL editor right here. We can then go to the top left here and press new query. For this video, we are going to be creating a relatively simple SQL table. The main focus of this video is showing you guys how to use the Supabase database operations. I plan on doing a full video on how to create advanced PostgreSQL databases, everything you have access to when it comes to creating those tables, especially directly with Supabase. So if you're interested in creating more advanced tables, make sure to subscribe for that. For this video though, we can get started by saying create table, which means we're going to create a table, surprisingly, and I'm going to name it products. We are going to have an ID that is going to be of type big int, generated by default as identity primary key. This line of code just means that we are going to have an ID that is going to be the primary key of how we get access to this data in our database. For example, if I have the ID 1, I'll be able to get access to all the different things in the row of ID 1. For example, the name or description of the product there. So you can make a name column and set it equal to a text property, and also a description column and set it equal to a text property. In order to actually create this table, we can press run on the bottom right here. It should say success, no rows returned. If you're getting an error, make sure you didn't spell anything wrong. SQL can get especially picky about that. But now that we've created a table, we can actually leave the SQL editor and go to this table editor right here. It's right above where SQL is. You'll see we now have the table called products. And within our products table, we have the ID, the name, and the description. I would recommend to go and manually create a product like I do right now, so we have some data to fetch initially. We can insert a product by going to insert row right here. The ID is going to be automatically generated, so don't look at that. We can then make the name of our product, for example, Cooper Codes YouTube channel, and then the description of the product, which is the best coding channel ever. You should really subscribe. So this is coming from a totally unbiased source, so we can save that. And now we actually have a product that exists inside of our table. All right, so now that we have our Supabase client fully initialized, we actually have data inside of our database. We can get started by going into our React application and kind of like chopping up all the different logic we need for creating data, reading data, updating it, etc. So let's get into it. Within our app.js, we're going to want to make sure that whenever we load the page, we are fetching data from Supabase. We can use the use effect hook in React to kind of implement that functionality. And we can define our effect to be use effect. It's going to take in two different parameters. The first one is the actual effect, which is what logic do you want to happen in this use effect. And then the dependencies array. The dependencies array is a thing where if there are any items or variables inside of this array and their values change, then run the effect again. And so if we have an empty dependency array, it's only ever going to run the effect once, and it's going to run it as soon as our application builds. Inside of this effect, we can call a function. For example, get products. You'll see get products is not defined, but we can go down here and make the function. It's going to be an asynchronous function because we are working with a database call or an API call that we are going to use await for. We can define it by saying get products like this. And some relatively simple syntax to use when actually using the get products is a try and a catch statement. So we're going to try and make the API call, and if anything bad happens, we can catch an error and we can alert that error.message. So now we can define our Supabase API call. We can say const data, error is equal to await Supabase. This is because Supabase is returning a promise that we're going to want to wait for. It kind of promises us that it's going to give us data eventually. Or if it doesn't, it's going to give us an error data at least. But hold on one second, we actually have to import this Supabase object from the Supabase client. So let's go to the top here and import Supabase from /Supabase client like this. This is giving us access to the client that we created over at the line 7 of our Supabase client here. Now that we have access to the Supabase client, we can ask for data from a specific table by saying supabase.from. From which table do we want to get data from? Well, we want to get data from the products table. Then we can say, what data do we want to select from this table? For this video, I'm going to select all the data because I'm trying to show all the different products that are currently showing in our table. Then you can also set a limit if you want. I'm just showing this to show you guys. I'm going to show the most 10 recent things at the top of our table. And that's all we need to do because everything's set up. You could imagine that this Supabase call is like going to a website. We are going to a website and we're asking for specific data from that website. From which part of the website do you want data? For example, like a certain link. What data do you want from the website? Well, we want everything in the table, and how much data is our limit? We want 10 total things. And so if there's an error here, we can then throw an error. And the throw keyword is allowed to us because we are in a try and catch statement. And so this allows us to catch the error right here. And so Supabase can return null, but as long as the data doesn't equal null, we can set products of the data object that we're going to get back from Supabase. And this data object is pretty much just going to be an array of objects. So product 1, product 2, product 3, etc. But here's the thing, we haven't actually defined the state to set products yet. So we can go to the top of our React application and say const products is our state, and then set products is equal to a use state that's initially going to be an empty array. When we load in data from Supabase, you'd imagine this array is going to be filled up with all the different products as I commented here. And so here's an interesting thing. We have all these different columns with these product cards, but we actually want to render one product card for each actual product we find in our array. In order to display the data from Supabase, we can go in here and say products.map. This allows us to map over every single index of the array. And at each index, we can get access to the object there. For example, the product object. And then this is going to return a actual JSX element, for example, a column that's going to have a product card. Just a quick comment, you guys don't have to comment this, but soon we are going to want to add a product is equal to product property to our product card. So we can build a product card based off certain information. But let's delete all these columns that we kind of spammed here. So we have just this. When we run our code now, we should expect just one column to show because we only have one item in our database. Let's go see what happens. I was right. So we only have one product here. We can actually go back to the app again, and we can even console.log products right before our return statement. So we can see what React is seeing. And you guys will see we have an array here, and this array has the actual information coming from our Supabase table. It has the description, the ID, and the name all stored within an object. So we can pass this object over to our product card to kind of build a unique card based off this information. So let's do that now. In our product card, we can set the product property equal to the product that we're currently traversing over. And to use this product within our component, we can go over to productcard.js, go to the top and allow props to be used here by just adding the props to the parameters. And the product is getting stored in the props.product. So we can say const product is equal to props.product. And so this is amazing. It's going to give us access to the data of the product within this component. And so we can even use that data by going down into the title, for example, within the editing here and saying product.name. And we can also do in the description product.description. So let's go and look at our React application now. Amazing. So we're kind of getting full circle. We now have a request that allows us to see real data coming from Supabase within our application. One little thing that we can add while we're here is when we press edit product, one thing we can add while we're in the product card component is we can press edit product here. And we probably expect that the product name and the product description are filled with whatever the current name is. We can do that by going over to our product card component. We can set the form controls to have a default value equal to product product.name, and the description one should have a default value of product.description. So let's go see this working in our application. So we can now see the current database items, and we can also edit the product, and boom, it's going to show us the current product name and the current product description inside of the actual card itself, which is really cool. All right, so before getting into the functionality of the card component, I'm actually going to go to the create product up here and get working on the actual create product component that's going to add a product to the table in our Supabase database. So now we are going to go back into app.js, and we can specifically look at this part where we say create product for Supabase database. When the user presses this button to create a product, we can point them to a function. For example, on click, when they click this function, what do we want them to do? We can point it to an arrow that says create product, for example. This create product is a function that we can define above. So when they click this button, we're going to call this function async function create product like this. And you guys will see it's kind of like cheating. What we can do is we can go to our get products and copy this whole try catch statement, because we are going to handle these kind of statements very similarly. The only thing that's really going to change is what do we do with Supabase and do we save any of the information? And so we're still going to be looking at the products table, so we can delete the select and the limit here. And now with the products table, we want to instead call a dot insert. Insert means we are going to be putting new data into a row inside a SQL. And we want all the different variables of that row to be defined. For example, what is the name we want to have in there? We can say the name property is equal to the name that the user inputted. This was a while ago, and so I'll explain this. This name is coming from that use state that we defined a long time ago. So it's going to be the value of whatever the user has inputted. We can also define the description equal to the description that the user inputted. We only want to insert one product, and so we can end this by saying dot single at the end. Because we're making an insert, we don't really want to set product data or anything like that, so we can get rid of this statement. Instead, we want to reload our page to show new information to the user. We can say window.location.reload. Because we're reloading the window here, we can actually fully see this functionality working. We're going to when the user creates a product, they are going to insert it here. We're then going to reload the page, call this get products again, which is going to include that new product. So let's go see this working. So we can set the product name. We can also set a little example description, and then we can create the product by pressing the button here. As you guys will see, we now have two different items of data inside of our database. And this isn't a React trick. If we want to go back to our Supabase DB over here, we can refresh and it will show the two different items that we've inserted. This is great work so far. So now we can go over to our database items. So now we can go over to the product card and get set up when it comes to deleting products and also editing products. And so we can get started by defining these functions above, where we know we are going to have an async function that is going to be for update product. For example, that's like when you're done editing, then you're going to want to run the update, and also an async function for delete product. That's when you press that delete button. And so think about where is this functionality going to get ran within the product card. Well, we know when the user presses the delete product button, we're going to want to run the delete product code. And so we can go to the onClick event here, make a function here that is going to then run delete product. And then what about updating the product? We know that if we want to update the product, the user is going to press editing. So it's going to be within the editing part here. And when they press this button on the bottom, which should say update product in Supabase DB, that's when they're going to want to update it. So you can make an on click on this button that's going to then run the update product function right there. And so now everything's wired up. All we have to do is define the logic of update product and the logic of delete product. I know it seems crazy, but check this out, guys. We can go over to app.js and let's go into create product. I'm going to copy this entire try statement. So everything within create product, we can go back over to product card and paste it into update product. Updating a product is incredibly interesting because update and insert run very similarly. And before we get working more on this, we want to make sure to go to the top and then import Supabase from /Supabase client. This gives us access to the Supabase const right here. And so update runs incredibly similarly to insert. It's going to say which values in this row do you want to update, and it actually uses the exact same object. So we can say in the products row, we want to update a row with these items. The thing is, at this point, our SQL has no idea which row we're actually talking about. The good thing though, is that we have access to the product, right? And so we also have access to the product.id. So we can use the .eq filter. This is going to allow us to find the row that equals the ID. So which row has an ID which is equal to the product.id we are currently editing. And because the ID is that primary key we talked about before, there's only ever going to be one row with that unique ID. So you're going to be updating this one specific product. product. Same thing, we want to keep if there's an error, we want to throw the error, and then we're also going to reload the page. And so now we can copy this full try catch statement and bring it over to our delete product. Same exact thing. It's interesting. We can say, okay, we are at Supabase and we want to go to the products table. And now instead of updating, we want to run .delete. From the Supabase perspective, you should read it like this. Okay, let's take a look at this current user's Supabase, so our Supabase. We want to look at their products table and we want to delete something. At this .delete, it doesn't know what exactly you want to delete. From there, you can toss in a certain filter. For example, we can filter by saying we want to delete the row that has an ID that is equal to our product.id. So this will run and delete a certain row, and then we are going to load our window again. So let's go over to our application and see the final website. So one last thing we actually need to do that I didn't talk about earlier is that now that at the top we have access to this product, we can go into these use states that we made. We want to make sure that these states are initially equal to the product.name and then the product.description. This is because take a look at the actual code we wrote in the React part below. This form.control only updates our state when the value changes. So if someone edits a product and then they never change the value, it was showing an empty state previously. But now that we have a default value, if they never change it, it's okay because it's going to still be that default value in our state. All right, let's go take a look at the final website. So we can go in here and we can delete the water bottle, for example, by saying delete product. It's going to go in and completely erase that row from our SQL table. We can also edit a product, going in here saying, thanks so much for watching, and it's going to fully edit. And remember, this data is coming directly from Supabase, so it's updating right away. We can also create another product at the top here. So I'm going to make some generic product and create it here. And we're going to see that this new product gets added right here. If this helped you out in any way, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Hopefully this video got you up and running with Supabase and especially the new Supabase V2 database. Thanks so much for watching.